Well, good evening. Great to see all of you here. Thankful for those who are out there watching this via live stream. Hopefully everyone's had a restful afternoon and ready to close out our series of lessons on the parables of Jesus. There are more, and we could go on to those, but I think we're about ready to move on to some new things. And I have several ideas. I have a couple of weeks to determine which way I'm going to go after that. So if you have any input, I'm open to receive it. But I have so many series in mind, I can't get them all in at once. I was talking this afternoon, I said, well, maybe we can do 3 services on Sunday. That way I can have 3 series going at once. I didn't get a lot of traction with that, but anyway, it was a thought for a moment. But we're going to close out with this parable from Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, as we understand it. And you see a talent there, a representation of a talent. It was a measure of money. Some of it was silver, some of it was gold, and had different weights, and the values were really high. And so when you look at what we have here in this parable, you have 3 different servants who are given a measure of wealth, who are given a deposit. They're entrusted with these talents, and the expectation was that they would take those and that they would multiply, that they would serve their Lord with what He had given them, what He had entrusted them with, within their capabilities, and bring back an increase. And 2 of the 3 we're going to see are faithful to that, and they are rewarded by entering into the joy of their Lord or their master. The other, he is slothful, he's lazy, he chooses not to do anything with it, but rather to just give back what was initially handed to him, and ultimately he's sent away. And so that's really the gist of it. It's really simple. We're going to look at the emphasis in this parable because it runs right on the heels of the parable we looked at a couple of weeks ago, the parable of the 10 virgins. There we have a little bit different emphasis. You see the lady up here in the top left who is looking out, who's watching for something. That's what the parable of the 10 virgins is about. And over here on the bottom right, you have some hands that are obviously been working, right? And we understand what that is. That's really the difference in the last parable and this one. The previous parable emphasized the need to be watchful. It's kind of an inward disposition that is under consideration there. And so while we await Christ's return, if you recall, the emphasis was that we need to be mindful of the things that are necessary to endure to the last, to make it through our life on this earth, or if we're here when He comes back, to make sure that we are found faithful when He comes. So we are to be watchful. In this parable, the emphasis is on the need to be doing something with that. We have a certain amount of time on this earth, and we have responsibilities that have been given to us by our Lord. And while we await His return, we are supposed to be working. Now, if you notice in this parable, you find 2 types of workers. You're going to find those that are good and faithful, and you're going to find those that are wicked and lazy. Now, we didn't get to all of the latter part of that in the reading, but we're going to come upon it. But there were, in that reading there, we have the foundation of this laid for us. And so this is what we have. What kind of worker are we? That's what we want to answer tonight. And as we move forward with our lives on a day-to-day basis, every day we make decisions. What we're going to do with the deposit that's been entrusted to us. If we chose to join the Lord's team, if you will, if we chose to become His servant, that's one of the things that I think gets missed a lot. And people in the world around us, they criticize Christianity because of its demands, because we're not to do certain things that other people feel free to do, and because we are commanded to do things that other people would not care to do, and maybe we don't even care to do those. Does the things that the Lord teaches ever put you in a position where you have to do something uncomfortable? I know it has me, and I know it will again. Anybody else like myself not particularly care for being uncomfortable? I'd say most. We like comfort, right? I enjoy comfort quite a lot. Comfort's actually my favorite. But I'm told by my Lord to get uncomfortable and to do certain things. And so the world looks at this as just this overbearing thing, but here's the thing that's often missed. Not one of us was pressed into His service. Not one of us was drafted into His service. Not one of us was forced into His service. If you are a Christian, if you are a child of God, you are a Christian because you heard the things that were prepared for you to hear. You heard the gospel of Jesus Christ, you believed it, you repented, you confessed Him before men, you were buried with Christ through baptism, completely of your own free will. And in doing so, you made a pledge. You chose to be His servant. So this is a completely different kind of service. This isn't the kind where anybody's forced to do anything. So we need to keep that in mind. And so when we enter into that service and we understand that He expects of us certain things, it should come as no surprise to us whenever we are rewarded if we fulfill those duties or if we are punished for a failure to do so. We have been duly warned. And this particular parable lets us know that. So let's turn back and we'll look at the responsibility. Okay, we have a responsibility if we are children of God. We have been entrusted. You see the passing of the baton there, as in there were some games that just got concluded not long ago, right? International games, and I understand the United States fared pretty well in these games where there was a lot of running going on, and that's great. But the relay is one of those games where you run your leg and then you hand that off. Okay? Now, what does that have to do with Christianity? Well, when we think about what we've been entrusted to do, Jesus left His people work to do. And this passing of the baton, if you will, or the torch, whatever the case, however you want to illustrate this, in John chapter 9, verse 5, Jesus said, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Okay? Now, is He in the world today? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. And the answer is yes, but not in the sense that He was when He made that statement. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16, He passed the baton. He passed the torch to His disciples, or He said that He would. It didn't happen at that moment. He said, "You are the light of the world." Okay? A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden. And then He makes the illustration of no one, lights a candle and puts it under a bushel or under a bowl, however it's translated there. No, you set it up on a candlestick so that it gives light to everyone in the room. And then Matthew 28, verses 18 through 20, what we call the Great Commission. He said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples," or teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So the expectation is that we be doing this work, but He has entrusted us with this responsibility. He has given us the responsibility of being His hands and feet, if you will, and His mouthpieces here on this earth. And something you might not think about, the people that you meet in the world around you, you may be the only gospel that they have ever heard. You may be the only Bible that they have ever encountered, the life that you live. So no pressure, but know that responsibility is laid at your feet, and it's laid at my feet with whomever we come in contact with. And so here's another thing, though. That might sound a little bit too heavy, but what we need to know is that our responsibility, and that's part of what is illustrated here. Why did one man in this parable get 5 talents to work with, and another was given 3, and another was given 1? Well, because God doesn't expect any more from us than we are capable of bearing, right? Some of us in this very auditorium here have very hefty responsibilities. Some of you are business owners, some engineers and teachers and medical professionals and various different things. You have a certain amount of responsibility, right? There are jobs that some of you do I can't do, okay? Many that I can't do. There are some that I don't think, even with an attempt at training, I don't think I am wired up to do, right? Anybody can sympathize with me on that? Are there things that you're really good at because you're kind of made that way and it clicks for you, okay? And then there are things that probably don't click so much for you, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to find what our strengths are and work with those, and that's what we see illustrated here in Matthew 25 whenever he talks about this. Now, in Luke chapter 12, verses 47 and 48, we learn this principle again. He says, "That servant who knew his master's will and did not prepare himself or do according to his will shall be beaten with many stripes." So there's punishment here for a failure to prepare and to do. "But he who did not know, yet committed things deserving of stripes, shall be beaten with few." What's he saying? Ultimately, I'm responsible for making sure that I know, but if I don't know, if I'm not able, my capabilities can't keep up with the demand. I'm not going to be expected the same things of me as that which those who know are expected to fulfill. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. Okay, so if you're the kind of person who can read and study the Bible, I remember a time in my life, and I wish I hadn't wasted those years on worthless worldly things. There was a time in my life where my memory was very powerful, and I wish so badly I had spent those years filling my mind with the Scriptures. Okay, unfortunately I didn't do that. Now, I still have some memory, but I have to work a lot harder at it than I did back then. Okay, now some of you have minds that are just remarkable. The things that you can store away, the things that you can retain and remember and understand. And a lot of it has to do with what interests us. Okay, but whatever your ability, others can try as hard as we want to. And it's just not going to happen that way. We just have to keep going back. And we have to keep working with what we have. Here's the beauty of it. God expects nothing more from you than what you are capable of doing for Him. And that is illustrated in this parable that we have right here. That's a comforting thought, isn't it? I think sometimes we may weigh others down with our expectations that are beyond their capabilities, because unlike God, I don't know all of your capabilities. Now, we don't want to take that and go to the other extreme and decide that, well, I'm only capable of so much. Can you expand your capabilities? Anybody ever done that? If you've been to college, if you've been to a trade school, if you've just gone through your regular secondary education, if you've gotten a high school diploma or even a GED, you have expanded your capabilities from where you started. Now, at some point, the elasticity's gone, our strength is waning, we're on the downward side of the hill there, and we can't expand them. But during the time that we can, we've been expected to do that. But the thing I want us to think about here, He doesn't expect any more of us than we are capable of giving Him. But He demands, and that's a big word, demands. It doesn't mean that I have the option of what's behind door number 1, 2, or 3. Well, I'll pick the easy one over here. I'm going to give Him just enough that I feel satisfied with myself. Only you know what you're capable of doing, okay? And only you and God know whether or not you are living up to that capability. But no, He demands it. Whatever our best is, that's what He demands of us. And so we better be ready, according to this parable, to live up to that responsibility, because what he turns to here in verses 16 through 18 is a matter of reliability. Okay? So we're all given a responsibility, every one of us. Whatever that whatever our capabilities are, we have a responsibility that is commensurate with that, and we're expected to live within it. But are we reliable? Okay, this is a really important thing to think about. What does it mean to be reliable? Well, reliability is to be able to produce good results time after time, that which is expected. Okay, it is how much a person can be depended on. How important is that in your life? Do you know anybody that you just can't depend on them for anything? They might say they're going to do this or that, but you know they're not going to. You've experienced that enough. Or maybe that's you. Maybe that's been the case with you yourself. There have been times in my life where I was so easily distracted with the things I wanted to do for myself, I wasn't dependable. I confessed one of those in an illustration about working on my dad's house when I was a teenager. Okay, because I was too busy doing my own things. I didn't have time. I wasn't reliable. He needed me, and I was not reliable, and I'm ashamed of that. Wish I could fix it. I can't now. I can just do better. That's all that I can do with that. But reliability is what is expected here, and that's what we find in this parable. So those first two servants, they demonstrated that they were reliable. They took the deposit that was given to them, and they doubled it. Okay, the 5-talent man, he comes back with 10. Okay, and the other comes back with a double on his deposit as well. But the third servant, all he did was keep what was deposited with him in the first place, what was entrusted to him. Now you might say, well, that's not bad. He didn't lose anything, right? And that's true. He didn't lose anything per se, but when you look at the response here, whenever he gives his excuse, and we'll turn to that here in just a moment, you'll notice he says, well, you should have taken it and deposited it with the bankers, and I would have gotten it back with interest. So ultimately, because he did nothing, there was a loss. Now, if you're a child of God, you know what the Lord expects of lost people. That's really what this comes back to. What does the church exist to do? Well, to glorify God, we're to offer up the fruit of lips, the sacrifices of God, the things that He expects of us. As we've seen on the Wednesday night class out here in the auditorium, in the adult class, we've been talking a little bit about being the spiritual household that is being built up, a spiritual house being built up, that we as this priesthood of believers are able to offer up spiritual sacrifices holy and acceptable to God. Okay, but that's part of it. The other part is to go out and convince others to become a part of it, to evangelize, to reach the lost. So if I just take this ability that He's given me and this trust that I've been entrusted with, and I do nothing with it, souls that are ready, and they're out there. There are people. I know oftentimes we get so caught up in despair thinking that, this world's just turning so dark, and in some ways it is. But I know a lot of people whose heads are being raised up right now, especially with everything that's happened over the last almost year and a half now, I guess. There are more people whose hearts are primed, and they're waiting on you, or they're waiting on me to come along and share this with them. So if I do nothing, then I have cost my master the increase that he asked me to go out and work for him. And so we have to keep this in mind. This third servant kept what was deposited. The first two they went right to work with what was given to them, and they worked until the master returned. Okay? The other one, he made no effort. He didn't produce anything. He did nothing to increase what the master had given him, and so he ultimately paid the price. So we have a responsibility. The question we have to answer is, are we reliable or are we not? And now we come to this, and you'll notice that this parable is disproportionately concerned with this last part, the accountability. So I want to come back here and pick up in verse 19. We've already read verse 19, but I want to pick up there so that we get the rest of the thread. And so we have the 5-talent man who comes back with 10. The 2-talent man comes back with 4. The 1-talent man just gives back what he has. And after a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. Now, the long time is important, because where is the Lord right now? What about His coming back? In 2 Peter 3, Peter talked about scoffers who would say, you've been talking about this all this time. Where is He? Why hasn't He come back yet? And I'll tell you why. Because the world's just going on like it has from the beginning, and nothing's going to change, and you people are nuts. You're wasting your time on all of this stuff. Well, while the Lord is tarrying, and He's giving people an opportunity, is He not? Isn't it the patience of the Lord that's holding Him back right now? The long-suffering of God, is that not salvation? Where would I have been if He had come back before I made my way back to Him through the gospel? There are people out there, like I say, that are poised and ready to hear this and ready to embrace it. And so after a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. So we don't know what these many things are that He's going to make them ruler over, but the point in this, we don't need to press that too far. The point is, they did what they were able to do with the things He gave them. They produced an increase by the labor that they did, and they were rewarded for it. The most important phrase in both of these instances is that they were able to enter into the joy of your Lord. Good and faithful servant, those are the greatest words that can ever be spoken to you. You'll never hear a higher compliment or a more important compliment than when the Lord looks at you on Judgment Day and says, enter, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord. But notice what happened. In verse 24, then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now I want to address something here for just a moment. This accusation, this third servant not only doesn't do anything, but whenever he's asked to give an account, he really levels an unfair criticism at the feet of his master. And so when the master answers back, oh, you knew that I reaped where I hadn't sown and gathered where I hadn't scattered, he's not admitting that that's the case. But he's doubling down. He's saying, if that's the case, if that's the way you thought of me, well, then you ought to have had even more reason to be working and making an increase of this. And so we have this accountability. Accountability, are we answerable? Are we responsible? And ultimately, if we know enough to become a child of God, we are going to have to give an account for what we do with the time and the abilities and the responsibilities that He's given us. And so, after a long delay, He comes back to settle these accounts. No matter how long it goes on, He's coming back, okay? And the thing is, if I leave this earth before He comes back, then it's as if He came back. Because my fate is sealed at that point. Hebrews 9:7 is still true today. There is an appointment that I have and that you have. It is appointed a man once to die and then the judgment. Once I die, my fate is sealed. Luke chapter 16, the rich man and Lazarus demonstrate that for us. And so it seems like forever sometimes, doesn't it? But we need to know it's not going to be forever. It's actually going to be very short for every one of us, whether it's if He comes back while we're alive or if we die before He does come back. But notice, these first two servants were judged to be good and faithful. The third was deemed to be wicked and lazy. Did you ever think that inactivity could be considered wicked? I'm not doing anything. This is just like those 5 virgins who were unprepared. It wasn't what they did wrong. It was what they didn't do right. This is what you would call the sin of omission as opposed to the sin of commission. It's not something that we actively do. It's something that we inactively refuse to do. And so the positive things that He gives us to do are every bit as important as the negative things He tells us not to do. But here's what we need to know. There are 2 ways that we can go. It breaks one of 2 ways. That's the Bible in a nutshell, isn't it? The 2 paths, 2 possibilities. It's always the same. The covenant may be different and the expectations different for us now than they were under Moses' law or under the patriarchal period. But at the end of the day, diligence is rewarded and laziness is punished. Now this is what gets me, folks. I'll have to tell you, there are times where if I'm honest with myself, I am not as diligent as I need to be. There are opportunities that I have left on the table. There are times when I could have said something and didn't say something, or could have done something and didn't do something. So here's my pledge. I'm going to do my best to overcome that. I hope that you'll join me in that, because the reward for these first 2 servants was to enter into the joy of their master. Think about that. Enter into His joy. Okay? And that is a sharing with Him in that joy. He has joy when we do what He would have us to do, and He shares that with us. Okay? He grants us to have that. Now I want you to think about this too. Oftentimes we might get enamored with some people that are just fantastic servants of the Lord, and we see the things that they do. This often happens with somebody's favorite preacher. I've heard that before, just go on and on about this preacher, that preacher. Well, it's not about the preacher. What did he preach? That's the thing that matters the most. What impact did it have on anybody's life? And it's not him doing it. He's just a servant. You know, that's what Paul said. He dodged any kind of praise in 1 Corinthians Chapter 4. He said, who is Apollos? And who is Paul? Nobody. Messengers, and that's it. Or what about those that just get so much done on the ground in whatever ways it may be? That's wonderful. Or if I'm the one that gets so much done, I don't need to look at your yield and compare it to my own. I'm not going to be judged by your yield, and you're not going to be judged by mine. I'm going to be judged by my faithfulness to the duty that was given to me. If I'm comparing what I do to what you do, I'm comparing myself and my deeds to the wrong standard. And the same works the other way around. So their yields were uneven. Okay, anybody disagree that 5 talents is more than 2? I mean, that's pretty simple. That's some of the math I can do. I can't get with Jeremy over here. He'd leave me sitting there just scratching my head, I know. And some of you others know math that would make me scratch my head. But 5 is greater than 2. I'm pretty sure that's right. Okay, all my good math checkers are making sure they're letting me know that's true. So actually, the yield of the 5 talent man is 2.5 times what the 2 talent man did, but the reward is the same because they both did the same thing. They took the abilities and the opportunities and the time, and they did the best that they could, and that's all that God's ever asked of anybody. So if you're feeling overwhelmed with what God might be asking of you tonight, don't. Because He's not asking you any more than you're capable of doing. And beyond that, He'll supply every need. Philippians Chapter 4. Paul made it clear there that because of their generosity and their sharing in his ministry, God was going to supply their every need so that they could do what He would ask them to do. That's what a just God would do, right? If I ask my children to do something, but then I don't give them the tools to do it, or I ask them to do something that's over their head, and then I turn around and I punish them for that, that's unjust. I'm not going to do that. And so God most certainly isn't, because He's far better than I am. So diligence is rewarded. Do the best you can with what you have to work with. That's what God is saying from one end of the Bible to the other. Because laziness is going to be punished. If I don't do what He tells me to do, if I don't do the best that I can, well, I'm going to be like this third servant. He was cast into outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now to the world that sounds terrible. That sounds harsh. But God is the just God. He is the one who knows everything. He is the Holy One. He is the ultimate standard, and He doesn't do anything that's not just and not right. This servant's sin was passive. That's what I want us to think about. It's what makes me so nervous about those things that I mentioned already, that I could have done and didn't do. Okay? His sin was passive, not active. He didn't do anything, and that's what got him in trouble. That's what had him punished in the end. So we have a responsibility. The question that we have to answer is, what is the level of our reliability? Because ultimately that is going to determine our accountability. Every one of us is going to be held accountable. If you're not a child of God, but you know that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, won't you crown Him your King by repenting of your sins on the basis of your faith, turning to Him, confessing Him before men, being buried with Christ through baptism into His death, so that the Father can raise you up to walk in newness of life. If that's what you know you need to do, you're accountable for doing that right now. And then you begin a whole new life with a whole new list of responsibilities and also a whole new list of rewards available to you. Make that decision. If you need to do that, do it tonight. Don't wait. If you've done that, but you know that you're not reliable in your service to the King, you can fix that. Anybody can. He'll supply your every need, and we'll be happy to help you with that. Don't leave this place as that third servant who was not doing the bidding of his master. You know what he would have you to do. Go ahead and do it. We're here for you. We love you. More importantly, God loves you. If anybody needs to respond, we beg you to do so right now. As together we stand and as we sing.